December 4th, 2003, a police officer was making his usual rounds in a local neighborhood. He stumbles upon a family that is horrified by someone shooting a flare gun in the neighborhood.
I'm gonna go try to get them to stop doing that.
The police officer could hear it too, and on following the sound, he found himself at the doorstep of James Yu, a 56-year-old man living alone in this neighborhood. The police officer made efforts to communicate with James Yu, who didn't comply.
Arlington County Police! Stop shooting the flares! Mr. Yu, can you hear me? Mr. Yu!
However, this was no shock to his neighbors, who described him as a reckless man exhibiting strange behavior. Now, James suffered from severe paranoia as he thought his neighbor's ex-wife, the police, as well as the US government were conspiring to kill him. This led to his strange behavior, as neighbors usually reported seeing him covering his windows with trash bags, aluminum foil, as well as toilet paper on his trees. It was clear that James' situation was only worsening, but no one was prepared for what was to come next. When the police arrived at his home, he was found shooting his flare gun yet again, 47 shots in the air non-stop. Not showing his face, not saying a word to the police, who repeatedly warned them to stop, but he didn't respond.
James, Arlington Police, come to the front door with your hands up. Do it now. We have your building surrounded. You're not leaving. Come to the door now with your hands up and surrender.
The police were left with no option but to demand James to leave his house for questioning, but same as before, he didn't respond. The police were growing wary as they couldn't identify James as a threat or not, leaving them with only one option: to force their way in and spray gas in order to bring James out. As soon as the police broke down his store, he started firing. By this time, James wasn't firing flares, he was firing actual bullets.
James, stay away from your front door. Stay away from your front door,
Clearly showing he does not welcome the police in his home. This forced the police to fall back and regroup and come up with a plan. But however, James had a plan of his own, and no one was ready for what was to come next. James blew himself up. He had stored about 500 gallons of gasoline for this specific moment and ignited it with no warning. He had initially planned to lure the police as well as his neighbors to his home to blow them up with himself, because James genuinely thought that they were working together, conspiring to kill him. But thankfully, none of the police officers or neighbors were injured, with the only body being found in the rebel being James Yu. However, James' story didn't end there, as many reported seeing him on social media posting comments on his YouTube channel, where he stated that he wasn't even in the house and everything was a cover-up. This does make sense to some degree, as we never actually got to see James or hear anything he ever said during the entire incident. However, all this was debunked as an autopsy confirmed the corpse in the rebel was indeed James Yu. Our second video takes us all the way to Somalia, in a small village named Holland. Video was spreading in the region. It was posted initially in October 2021.
waxaan halkan ka cadaynayaa maanta oo bishu ay tahay 17 bishii 2020 faarax cabdi caagan oo walaalkay ahaa hooyadii xawa jaamac Cabdulla Tuula Jalam ku dilay magaalada Tuula Jalam 16 bishii 6
The video wasn't really anything out of the ordinary. It depicted two men seemingly being interviewed by a news outlet. However, due to accent and language barrier, it's quite hard to make out what the conversation is actually about. But for those who knew, this was one of the most sinister acts ever performed in the village's history. For me, myself, and many of those who have stumbled across it on YouTube, even wonder how such a thing actually exists on this platform. Observably, in the video itself, two men are talking. A group of men behind them seem to be doing some activities like digging or working, though they didn't strike many at first. The video itself wasn't much of a head-scratcher. However, two things set it apart from everything else. First was the thumbnail. The thumbnail shows two people, one who appears to be tied on two poles with his head facing the ground, and the other seemingly standing there normal. But the man who is tied is never seen in the video. Secondly was the title, which if you don't speak the language, it's quite hard to understand anything. However, after Google Translate, the unsettling statement translates to Guru, the killer of his mother, was shot today. Now, such a title and thumbnail would explain why it circulated so quickly, but the video itself didn't see much of anything of the matter. Until you search deeper, upon looking up the title, you would find it's not only one video. There are many that feature the same thing, with one actually showing the man who was being tied up, explaining what was actually going on, and this was something the public was not prepared for. Turns out the man tied to the poles, namely Faral Abdul Muhammad, was a murderer, not of any random person, but of his own mother. You see, Faral had been under the influence of drugs, and this somehow caused him to murder his own mother of 7. His 6 other brothers couldn't forgive this act as they got their brother arrested. As word got out in the village, nobody was satisfied with this decision, especially Awai, one of Faral's brother. The police made the decision to leave the entire situation to the family, who made the gruesome decision to execute Faral. And to make matters even more disturbing, the executioner was Awai, his own brother, the same man who had been standing next to Faral in the thumbnail. However, Awai didn't want this to remain within the family. He wanted the entire village to witness and send out a message to anyone who dare attempt the same. This caused crowds of people to gather, as well as the news outlets, thus this video. And on that fateful day, many stood watching this unbelievable sight of a brother killing his brother for the murder of their mother. Now, to make this clip even more horrifying, the men that can be seen working in the background weren't actually farming. They were digging Faral's grave right in front of them. Awai was handed a gun, and he placed it on his brother's head, and with no hesitation, he pulled the trigger, instantly shooting him dead. However, unnerving of all is everyone's mood in the footage doesn't depict any kind of remorse, sorrow, or even sympathy, as many applaud Awai's act, and everybody looked seemingly proud of what just happened.
Pase, por favor, pase, por favor. Salgan los tres. Tranquilo. Aquí, señor. Afuera. Tranquilo. Listo. ¿Están aquí tus manos? ¿Hay armas?
Tranquilo.
No, él no tiene nada que ver, oiga.
The video you're looking at is disturbing for two reasons. Culiacan, Mexico, special forces gathered outside a house fully armed to the teeth as they were about to become part of history. You see, the man they were after, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, son to the infamous drug lord Joaquim Guzman, famously known as El Chapo, a leader of one of the most chaotic and dangerous Mexican cartels known as the Sinaloa Drug Cartel. The cartel was famous for its brutal executions and gang violence, and despite El Chapo's arrest in 2014, his son, Ovidio Guzman, was free, continuing where his father left off. Ovidio ran the cartel and all the criminal operations. But on this fateful day, Ovidio was located by Mexican special forces and the Mexican government. He was cornered with nowhere to run, and thankfully everything went according to plan with no shots being fired. Ovidio came out of his house peacefully without resisting the arrest. This was a huge success to the Mexican government, as they had captured the leader of one of the most dangerous organizations, or so they thought.
Tonight, a battle to control the state of Sinaloa, Mexico. With burning buses in the streets and travel restrictions in place after the son of El Chapo, Ovidio Guzman, was arrested by the Mexican military in what they say was a joint operation.
Just a few hours after his arrest, the city went into chaos. Cartel soldiers rang bullets, destroying property and injuring people. Hell broke loose. This was all in retaliations of the arrest of Ovidio. Despite Ovidio confirming to officers that he had called off all cartel activities, the cartel didn't listen and the chaos didn't stop and only became much worse as the Mexican military was overpowered by about 700 cartel soldiers fully armed. The destruction was so severe, causing the Mexican government to make a decision that shocked everyone. The decision to release Ovidio Lopez. Despite this outlandish decision, it did calm down the situation and everything did go back to normal. But to the cartel, this was far from over. This brings us back to the second reason as to why this video is so disturbing. Multiple special officers took part in this operation of arresting Ovidio, and they were led by Eduardo. The officers were likely praised and rewarded for this massive arrest. However, the cartel didn't think so. Over the next few days, one by one, the officers seen in this video were brutally murdered by the cartel members, starting with Eduardo, who was attacked right outside his car and was shot 155 times. He didn't stand a chance of survival. This was a message of revenge to the police and the whole of Mexico. Do not mess with the Sinaloa drug cartel. April 18, 2010, Gavin Collins will be released from prison. However, this was a very big mistake. Gavin didn't last a day outside prison as he was enraged with fury, which was a cause of a mental breakdown. Earlier that morning, just a day after his release, he was reported by pedestrians who heard him saying that he was Jesus and claiming to be invincible. And without warning, he drew his attention to a random house. He forced his way in and stole the car keys, speeding off but seemingly going nowhere. Luckily, the car he stole had two cameras, one being the dash cam and another being an interior camera that clearly showed Gavin's face. And it was clearly seen that he was not in his right senses.
I'll shut you up with the eyesight I've got. Hey, don't need this. Come on, let's go, bro. Let's go. Now you taught me to drive. Watch me go now. Hey. Hey, please, don't go.
Upon first glance, it's clear Gavin is not okay, as he seems to be infuriated for some unknown reason. He even rips off the rearview mirror. However, the most unnerving of it all is that Gavin seems to be driving at speeds well over 120 miles per hour, just barely dodging other vehicles. Well, that is for now.
Lady, and you know what? You talk, getting rid of all the crap hairs. Let's go. Let's go. I'm enraged. I'm Jesus. I'm descendant of God, and you lock me up. Watch this. You think I'm strong? Wait until you meet my of him, because ultimately he'll give her an ultimatum: either listen to Gavin, Mum, or you're gonna go to hell. Me? Watch this. Watch me go. You. Watch this now. I'm getting stronger and stronger by the second. Technology. No one can use it like me, because I invented the. Where do you think it comes from? Me! Watch.
In just mere minutes, Gavin crashes into a brick wall at full speed. The crash was unbelievable, but even more unbelievable was that Gavin was alive. In fact, he wasn't even injured, to say the least. He got out of the damaged car and flushed the woman out of his vehicle, and he was back on the road again, continuing with his ridiculous speeds until he crashed again. And yet again, somehow Gavin manages to survive completely unharmed, confirming to himself that he was truly invincible. And to him, this was far from over. He turned his attention yet again to another home to pursue his vehicle of the bay, which will total it up to 3 cars. In the home was a mother and her 2 kids. He forced his way inside the house using a brick, injuring himself in the process. He threatens the woman through her qualities, to which she willingly complies. But just before Gavin leaves the house, he draws crosses on the 2 kids' heads in his own blood, and he further claims to be Jesus. He leaves the house with his 3rd stolen car, but this time the police aren't far behind. To make matters worse, he was more reckless than before, as he hit a brick wall and even crashes into a police car. Before speeding off, for some unknown reason, he switches his aim to a specific pedestrian standing innocently on the road. For whatever reason, Gavin was enraged by the sight of this man. He hit the brakes and accelerated, hitting the man at full speed, leaving him motionless on the ground. He was an 87-year-old teacher who was now dead. The sight of this prompted Gavin to shout out at the top of his voice, "I have killed him. I have killed the devil." Minutes later, Gavin would crash yet again, only this time the police did manage to arrest him, putting an end to his road rage. But many wondered, why was such a man released in the first place? You see, Gavin wasn't of any good behavior in prison either, as he assaulted 2 officers, setting his own cell on fire twice and managing to find himself in solitary confinement. If he hadn't gone crazy before, he was now, as he somehow managed to start yet again another fire in there. And when an officer arrived to put it out, he threatened to kill him with a plastic knife. His stay in prison just made his condition far much worse, but he was still released anyway. A mistake they will regret forever. Upon his arrest, Gavin was sentenced to 21 years in prison, and to everyone's shock, there was no trace of drugs or any substances of any form in Gavin's system, so this was solely his own doing.
Hey! Hey, please, don't talk! Oh, you're helping me! Good, keep it going!